It was November 12th, 2018, at exactly 3:17 a.m. when I first heard it. A sound so ordinary, so human, that at first I thought I was dreaming. But the longer I lay there in bed, staring at the ceiling, the clearer it became. Footsteps. Slow, dragging, deliberate, moving across the hallway just outside my bedroom door. I live alone. That was the first thought that hit me. There shouldn't have been anyone else inside my apartment. The doors were locked. The windows latched. My building was quiet, the kind of place where nothing ever happens. So who was walking in my hallway at 3 a.m.? The rhythm was wrong. Too careful. Each step creaked against the old wooden floorboards as if the person, if it was a person, wanted me to hear them. I held my breath, listening, heart hammering in my chest. The sound grew closer. A shuffle, then another, until it stopped right outside my bedroom door. The silence was worse than the footsteps. I stared at the sliver of light under the door, waiting to see if a shadow would pass across it. My body screamed at me to grab my phone, to call for help, but I couldn't move. And then it came, faint but undeniable. A single step, a groan of wood. Whoever it was, they were still there, standing on the other side of the door, waiting. And that was only the beginning. When people hear stories like this, they always imagine the setting as some crumbling old mansion or a house on a lonely country road. But my place wasn't like that. I lived in a small, second-floor apartment in a quiet neighborhood just outside the city. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. 2 bedrooms, faded cream-colored walls, and a long hallway that connected the front door to the living room. That hallway would come to haunt me. But back then, it was nothing more than a stretch of scuffed floorboards I barely noticed. My days followed a simple rhythm. I'd wake at 7, make coffee strong enough to wake the dead, and head out for my job at the insurance office downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. Most nights, I came home exhausted, too tired to do anything more than reheat leftovers and collapse onto the couch with the TV humming in the background. The building itself was old, but not ancient. Built in the late 60s, I think. It had the kind of thin walls where you could hear your neighbors arguing, or the distant thump of someone's stereo on a Saturday night. But otherwise, it was quiet, almost too quiet. By midnight, the entire building seemed to go still, as if everyone inside it had been put under some spell of sleep. I told myself that's why I liked it. No one bothered me. No constant parties. No children screaming in the halls. Just peace. But sometimes peace hides other things. That week had been cold. Early November, the kind of chill that seeps into your bones. I remember the air in the apartment smelled faintly of old wood and radiator heat. Outside, the trees had already shed most of their leaves, leaving the streets bare and brittle. I kept the windows shut tight, the curtains drawn, and the heat turned up just enough to keep the night at bay. There was nothing unusual about that day, nothing to mark it as the start of anything. I remember eating microwave pasta for dinner, flipping through a few channels, and heading to bed around midnight. Just an ordinary night in an ordinary life. At least, that's what I thought. It started small, so small I almost didn't notice. A faint creak in the hallway when I knew no one else lived on my floor. A misplaced mug in the kitchen that I swore I hadn't touched. The whisper of cold air brushing past me when every window was shut. I told myself it was nothing. Old buildings settle, pipes rattle, and tired people forget where they leave things. That's all it was. That's all it had to be. But the strangest part wasn't the sounds or the objects. It was a feeling. Every night, as I walked down the hallway toward my bedroom, I felt it, the sensation of eyes on me. Not the casual kind you feel in a crowded room. No, this was sharper, like someone was standing too close in a dark room, breathing quietly, waiting for me to notice. I tried to laugh it off. I told myself it was just because I lived alone, because I'd been watching too many late-night crime shows. But still, the feeling stuck with me, following me down the hallway, pressing against my back as I closed the bedroom door. I remember one night pausing halfway down the hall, just standing there in the dim light. The silence was so thick, it pressed against my ears. For the first time, I thought I heard something underneath it. A faint shift, a soft scrape, like the weight of a foot on wood. I shook my head and forced myself to keep walking. Just my imagination, I said, just a building. But deep down, something in me already knew this wasn't nothing. This was a beginning. The first real incident happened on a Wednesday night. I remember because I'd worked late at the office, filing reports that never seemed to end, and by the time I got home, it was close to 11. I reheated some soup, scrolled on my phone for a while, and finally decided to head to bed. Nothing unusual, nothing worth remembering, except what happened after the lights went out. I barely closed my eyes when I heard it. At first, it was faint, like the sigh of an old building settling into itself. But then it came again, a creak, followed by another, steady and deliberate. The sound of footsteps moving down the hallway. I froze, every nerve in my body straining. My bedroom door was closed, but I could hear the board complaining under weight of something, or someone, on the other side. I forced myself to breathe, to think logically. Maybe it was the neighbor downstairs. Sound traveled strangely in old buildings. Maybe it was pipes, or the heat kicking on. Anything but what it sounded like, a person walking just outside my door. The steps grew louder, closer. I sat up in bed, listening hard. My phone was on the nightstand, glowing faintly in the dark. I wanted to reach for it, but I was afraid the motion would make noise, that whoever, or whatever, was out there would know I was awake. And then the footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was worse. My heart pounded against my ribs so hard, I swore it must have been audible through the walls. I waited, seconds stretching into what felt like hours. Finally, I gathered the courage to move. Slowly, I swung my legs out of bed and crept toward the door. I pressed my ear against the wood. Nothing. No breathing. No shifting. Just silence. I stood there for what must have been 5 full minutes before I finally dared to twist the knob and crack the door open. The hallway yawned back at me, empty and dim. The faint glow of the street lamp outside filtered through the blinds of the far end, painting pale lines across the floor. Nothing moved. Nothing waited. I stepped out, bare feet cold against the boards, and walked the length of the hall. Empty. I checked the front door. The deadbolt was still locked. The chain still fastened. I checked the windows, the living room, even the kitchen. No signs of forced entry, no strangers lurking in the shadows. Just me. I told myself I was overtired. Stress from work. Too much caffeine. Too many crime shows before bed. I laughed under my breath, but the sound was thin, shaky. I went back to bed, forcing myself not to look over my shoulder as I closed the door. But just as I began to drift toward uneasy sleep, I heard it again. One single creak. Right outside my door. I snapped awake, staring at the ceiling, every muscle rigid. This time, I didn't get up. I didn't open the door. I just lay there, listening, wide-eyed, until dawn's pale light finally broke through the blinds. The next morning, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the wood expanded in the cold. Maybe the neighbors came home late and the sound traveled up. Maybe I dreamed half of it and only thought it was real. That's what I told myself. But the truth was, I knew better. I knew the sound of footsteps when I heard them, and I knew they had stopped outside my door. For the first time since moving in, I didn't feel safe in my own home. And as much as I wanted to convince myself it was over, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was only the beginning. Because that night, lying awake in the dark, I heard it again. And this time, it didn't stop. The following nights bled together into a blur of exhaustion and dread. Every time I closed my eyes, the footsteps returned. Sometimes they came early, just after midnight. Other times, they waited until 3 or 4 in the morning, as if deliberately testing the limits of my nerves. Always the same rhythm, slow, deliberate, heavy enough to groan the boards beneath them. At first, I tried to ignore it. I buried myself under blankets, pressed pillows against my ears, told myself I was imagining things. But the sounds didn't fade. If anything, they grew bolder, sharper, impossible to deny. And then came the second change. They started moving. Before, it had only been outside my bedroom door. Now, the footsteps roamed the hallway, back and forth, pausing, shifting, sometimes pacing for hours, other times stopping in one spot, as if waiting for me to make the first move. I began to dread the nights. My days became a haze of fatigue. At work, I snapped at co-workers. My eyes burned from lack of sleep. Coffee stopped helping. People asked if I was sick. I laughed it off, but the truth was, I was unraveling. I even thought about telling someone. My parents, a friend, maybe even my landlord. But what would I say? That phantom footsteps were haunting my apartment? They'd either laugh or worry about my mental health. So I kept quiet. But silence became dangerous. One night, the footsteps were louder than ever. I sat up in bed, trembling, phone clutched in my hand, thumb hovering over 911. I watched a thin slice of light beneath the door, waiting for a shadow to pass. And then it did. A dark shape shifted across the gap, breaking the faint glow from the living room. Someone was out there. Someone was walking in my hallway. I bit back a gasp, covering my mouth with my hand. I wanted to scream, but the sound lodged in my throat. The footsteps stopped again, right at my door. The handle rattled. It was faint, cautious, like whoever was out there wanted to test if it was locked. The knob twisted just slightly, then stilled. I couldn't take it anymore. I lunged for the door, yanked it open, heart pounding so violently I thought I might pass out. The hallway stretched before me, empty. No one. Nothing. I searched every corner, flung open the front door, checked the locks, even leaned over the banister to scan the stairwell. Silence. I slammed the door shut and bolted it. But when I turned back, I noticed something I couldn't explain. On the wooden boards of the hallway floor, just a few feet from my bedroom door, were faint, dark impressions. Not stains, not scuffs, footprints. Bare, human, as if someone had walked there with wet feet. But the floor was dry, and they stopped abruptly, halfway down the hall. No trail, no direction, just gone. I stood there shaking, staring at the prints until my eyes blurred. Finally, I forced myself back into the bedroom and locked the door, but sleep was impossible. I sat upright against the headboard until morning, watching, waiting. After that night, things only got worse. Objects started moving. A chair pulled slightly out from the table when I knew I'd pushed it in. A picture frame tilted at an angle. Once, I came home from work to find the bathroom light on, though I hadn't used it that morning. And then came the whispers. At first, I thought it was my neighbors through the thin walls. A faint murmur, too soft to make out. But soon I realized it wasn't coming from the walls at all. It was coming from the hallway. Low, rasping voices, just at the edge of hearing. Sometimes single words, sometimes laughter, sometimes my own name. I began avoiding the hallway altogether. I'd rush down it during the day, refusing to look left or right, never stopping, never pausing. At night, I locked myself in my bedroom and pushed the chair against the door, praying it would hold. I even thought about moving. I started browsing apartments online, calculating how much it would cost to break my lease. But something in me hesitated. A stubborn part that said, if I run now, it'll follow me. I need to face this. That thought terrified me most of all. By the second week, I was barely functioning. I left lights on in every room. I slept with my phone in my hand. I jumped at the smallest sound, the fridge humming, the pipes clanking. Every creak of the floor made my stomach twist with dread. I knew I was losing my grip. But the worst was yet to come. Because the last night of the escalation phase wasn't just about footsteps. It was about contact. I'd fallen into a restless sleep when I felt it. The unmistakable pressure of weight on the end of my bed. My eyes flew open. The room was dark, the curtains drawn, but I could feel it. Someone sitting there, pressing down the mattress. I froze, staring into the dark. My breath came shallow and fast. Slowly, the weight shifted, crawling closer. The bed springs groaned. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. And then, just inches from my face, I felt it, a hand brushing my cheek. Cold, rough, real. I screamed, flailing wildly, scrambling backward until I slammed against the headboard. I fumbled for the lamp, switched it on, flooding the room with light. But nothing was there. The bed was empty. And yet, the imprint on the sheets remained, as if someone had just risen and stepped away. That was the moment I knew there was no rationalizing it anymore. No denying. No pretending I was imagining things. Something was inside my apartment. and it wasn't going to stop. I didn't leave the apartment the next day. I called in sick to work, turned off my phone, and sat in the kitchen with all the lights on. The mug of coffee in front of me had gone cold an hour ago. My hands trembled so badly I couldn't hold it. I couldn't keep pretending this was all in my head. I'd felt it. A hand, cold and coarse, on my face. Something had been sitting on my bed. Something had touched me. I spent the entire day thinking of ways to end it. Salt lines at the door. Prayers. Moving out. Calling a priest. I even typed out an email to my landlord before deleting it. Nothing felt strong enough. Nothing felt real enough to stop it. By dusk, the walls already felt closer, heavier. The shadows lengthened like reaching fingers. I realized I couldn't hide another night. If I stayed passive, it would escalate again. I didn't know how I knew this, but I did. So I decided, tonight, I would confront it. I dragged every lamp in the apartment into the hallway and plugged them in, flooding it with harsh white light. I scattered salt across the boards in front of my bedroom door. In one hand, I held a heavy iron fireplace poker I dug from storage. In the other, my phone with 911 already typed out, thumb hovering over the call button. I stood there as the last light of evening drained from the windows, the apartment settling into an uncanny stillness. Even the hum of the fridge seemed muted. Midnight crawled by. My eyes burned from staring. My fingers ached from gripping the poker. Still nothing. Then, at 12:47, the lights flickered. Every lamp at once dimmed, buzzed, and came back brighter. Then dimmed again. Then snapped off, plunging the hallway into darkness. I gasped and lunged for the nearest lamp switch, twisting it, but nothing happened. Dead. All of them dead. That was when the footsteps began. Slow, deliberate, exactly like before, except louder, closer. And this time, they weren't just pacing the hallway. They were circling me. I spun, poker raised, heart hammering, eyes straining in the dark. Who's there? My voice cracked. I know you're there. Show yourself. The footsteps stopped. Silence pressing so thick I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. Then a whisper, low and rasping, just behind me. I'm here. I whirled around, swinging the poker at empty air. It whistled through nothing, clanged against the wall, sending vibrations up my arms. A soft laugh came from the opposite side, then another from behind me. Voices, multiplying, surrounding me in the dark. Why are you here? I shouted. What do you want? This time, the whisper was clear and close enough that I felt its breath on my neck. You invited me. The hallway went colder than winter. My breath fogged. My skin prickled with goose flesh. No, I muttered, backing up. No, I didn't. But a memory flared, unbidden, my first night here. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, scrolling my phone, jokingly reading aloud one of those viral urban legend summoning posts. I'd laughed at it. Knock twice, speak your name, invite the unseen guest to walk your halls. A harmless game. I'd thought. I'd done it. God, I'd done it. The laughter rose to a chorus, echoing around me. Footsteps advanced from every direction. Shadows lengthened against the walls even though no light shone. And then I saw it. Not a person. Not exactly. A shape, darker than dark, peeling itself out of the corner at the far end of the hallway. It had no face, only a suggestion of shoulders and limbs, but its movement was wrong. Fluid yet jerky, like time-lapse footage of someone walking backward. It glided toward me, silent now except for the boards groaning under its weight. I raised the poker, my voice a ragged whisper. Stay back. It didn't. It reached the edge of my salt line and paused. For a moment, I thought it couldn't cross. Relief flooded me. Then, with a single deliberate motion, it dragged a clawed hand through the salt, scattering it. The line broke, and it stepped over. I stumbled back, tripping over a lamp cord, hitting the floor hard. Pain shot up my hip. The phone skittered from my hand. The shape loomed above me now, towering, its head tilting in a parody of curiosity. I swung the poker wildly. It passed right through, like swinging at smoke. But the thing felt it. Its edges rippled. It hissed, a sound like wind through a graveyard. It lunged. A weight slammed into me, icy and crushing. I felt its hands, not claws anymore but long, bony fingers, wrap around my wrists, pinning me to the floor. Its face was inches from mine now, a void so deep it seemed to swallow the dim light from the street outside. I thrashed, screamed, tried to kick, but my limbs were sluggish, as though the cold itself was sinking into my muscles. The whispers poured from its void face, hundreds of voices overlapping. You invited me, you invited me, you invited me. I didn't mean to. I choked out. I take it back. Go away. The voices stopped. The thing's head tilted again, listening. Then it spoke with one voice, low and clear. Once invited, never gone. Its grip tightened. My vision sparkled at the edges. I was losing air, losing everything. In a last desperate surge, I wrenched one hand free and jammed the iron poker into the void where its chest should be. This time, it screamed, a sound like glass shattering, like wind howling through 100 empty holes. Its form rippled violently. The cold lessened. Its grip slipped. I scrambled backward on all fours, dragging the poker with me, gasping. The thing staggered, its shape unraveling like smoke torn by a gale. But it didn't vanish. It reformed, slower now, but still advancing, still reaching. I scrambled into the bedroom, slammed the door, locked it, jammed the chair against the knob. My hand shook as I fumbled for my phone, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. The operator answered. 911, what's your emergency? My voice cracked. There's someone in my apartment. Please send help. Even as I spoke, I heard it on the other side of the door. Not footsteps now. Scratching. Long, slow scratches, like fingernails carving the wood. You invited me. It whispered again, so close it could have been inside the room already. I backed against the far wall, clutching the poker like a talisman. Units on the way, the operator said. Stay on the line. But the scratching grew louder, deeper, and then the knob toned. The pounding on my door wasn't from the thing. It was from the police. 2 officers shouted for me to open up, their voices cutting through the thick silence that had followed the scratching. I yanked the chair away, fumbled with the lock, and nearly collapsed as they pushed in, flashlight sweeping the room. What happened here? One demanded, eyes darting from a broken salt line in the hallway to my trembling hands gripping the iron poker. My voice broke. Someone was here, in the apartment. They tried to. I stopped. What was I supposed to say? They came out of the shadows because I read a summoning joke online. I just shook my head. They tried to break in. The officers searched every corner of the apartment. Closet doors flung open, bathroom lights switched on, even the crawl space checked. Nothing. No footprints on the floorboards except mine. No forced entry. No intruder. When they came back, their flashlights low, one of them gave me the look. The look that said, "We don't believe you, but we'll play along." "You're sure someone was inside?" he asked. I nodded so hard my neck ached. Yes, I felt them. They touched me. The younger officer scribbled something in his notebook. Well, your door was locked when we got here. No signs of forced entry. Could have been a dream, maybe. I wanted to scream at him, to grab him by the shoulders and shake him until he understood. But instead, I just sagged against the wall, poker clattering to the floor. They stayed with me another 20 minutes, filling out a report, telling me to get some rest, to call if anything else happened. Then they were gone, leaving behind the faint smell of wet uniforms and the hollow echo of my own heartbeat. And the silence. The apartment was never really silent before. There was always some faint noise, the hum of pipes, a neighbor's footsteps, a car outside. But that night, after they left, it was different. Too still, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. I didn't sleep. I sat with every light back on, poker across my lap, eyes locked on the bedroom door until the first gray light of dawn crept through the blinds. When morning came, I finally let myself exhale. I'd survived, but something inside me had shifted. The next few days blurred together in fragments. I installed 2 new deadbolts on the front door. I bought a motion sensor camera and set it in the hallway, though I could barely stand to review the footage. I laid salt across the thresholds and windowsills, even sprinkled it in corners. I stopped going to work. Every creak, every whisper of wind through the vents sent me rigid with fear. I kept the poker beside me at all times, at the table when I tried to eat, by the couch when I pretended to watch TV, in the bathroom as I showered with the curtain half open. The shadows seemed longer now. They clung to the edges of the room, reluctant to retreat even in full daylight. And sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, I swore I saw movement. I'd snap my head around. Nothing. Just empty space. But I knew it wasn't gone. Night was worst. I tried everything. Candles, prayers, white noise, even sleeping pills. But every time I closed my eyes, I felt it. The heaviness. The breath against my ear. The cold fingers brushing my skin. I'd wake with my heart racing, drenched in sweat, the taste of iron in my mouth as though I'd been holding my breath for hours. Once, I woke to the faint sound of scratching again, but when I turned on the light, there was no mark on the wall, no evidence. It was like the thing had learned. It knew how to hide when others looked, but it never really left. I stopped inviting people over. Not that I had many friends in the city, but I couldn't risk it. I couldn't let anyone else feel what I had felt. My mother called, worried. I lied, told her I'd just been busy with work. My co-workers texted. I ignored them. Even my landlord called once about the noise complaint the neighbors filed after I'd screamed one night. I told him it was a TV. I was alone with it. That's how it wanted it. After a week, I started noticing something new. Whenever I looked in mirrors, my reflection felt wrong. Delayed, like the me in the glass wasn't moving quite in sync. I tested it once, raising my hand quickly. My reflection followed, but there was a faintest lag, a fraction of a second too slow. I smashed that mirror with the poker, then another, until only shards remained, reflecting fractured pieces of me from the floor. Even then, I swore I saw something standing in the broken glass that wasn't me at all. I told myself I'd move, pack up, leave the city, run as far as I could. But every time I tried, something stopped me. My chest would tighten, my breath would fail, and I'd hear it. That whisper, right behind me. You invited me. The truth was, leaving didn't matter. This wasn't about the apartment anymore. It wasn't tied to these walls or these floorboards. It was tied to me. I'd opened the door, and now it followed. I don't know how long it's been now. Days blur into nights. Nights blur into a haze of whispers and scratching and flickering lights. All I know is I'm not the same person anymore. Every creak of wood, every flicker of shadow, every whisper of wind feels like a threat. I jump at the sound of my own breath. I sleep with the lights on and still wake screaming. Sometimes I think I see people watching me on the street, their heads turning a little too slowly, their eyes lingering a little too long. As if the thing isn't just following me, it's spreading. I'm hollowed out. My life is just fear now, and no one believes me. But the worst part isn't the fear. The worst part is the waiting, because I know it's not finished with me. It could have killed me that night in the hallway, when it pressed its hands to my wrists and whispered in 100 voices. But it didn't. It let me go. And that terrifies me more than anything, because it means it has plans. Plans that don't end with me escaping. Plans that don't end at all. It's been years since that night, though sometimes it feels like I never left the hallway floor, iron poker in my hands, breath thrusting in the air, darkness swallowing the light. Time has passed. I moved from that apartment. I tried therapy. I filled my life with distractions, wake, long commutes, noise, people, anything to drown out the silence. And yet, no matter how many miles I put between myself and that place, the memory has followed me. Or maybe it's not just memory. Even now, as I speak, I can hear the faint creaks in my walls. I can feel the familiar weight in the room when the lights flicker. It isn't as strong as before, but it's there, always there. I tell myself that it hasn't fully returned, that maybe I've managed to keep it at bay. But some nights, when exhaustion blurs the edges of my thoughts, I hear the whisper, the same words, soft, patient, inevitable. You invited me. I used to think of those words as a curse, a sentence, proof that I had doomed myself forever by playing some childish game. But now, years later, I see them differently. They are warning, A reminder of how fragile the boundary is between our world and something else. How easily we invite things in without realizing. With our words. With our thoughts. With our blind, careless curiosity. We invite shadows every day into our homes, our heads, our hearts. We ignore the knock at the door, the strange sound in the night, the flicker in the corner of our vision, until it's too late, until we're no longer sure what's real and what isn't. That's a lesson I carry. That vigilance matters. That instincts are not jokes to be ignored. People laugh at me when I say this out loud. They think I'm paranoid when I check every lock twice, when I sleep with a light on, when I refuse to touch Ouija boards or read summoning stories online. They call it superstition, trauma, folklore, but they didn't feel what I felt. They didn't hear those voices pour from the darkness. They didn't watch something tear through the salt line like it was nothing. I did, and I know better now. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd done nothing. If I hadn't grabbed the poker, hadn't fought back, hadn't called for help. Would I have simply disappeared that night? Would people have chalked it up to a break-in gone wrong? Or would they have found me alive, but hollowed out, my reflection no longer my own? That thought haunts me more than the memory of the entity itself. That I could have been erased, replaced, forgotten. It's why I live carefully now. Why I listen to every instinct, no matter how small. Why I no longer dismiss the strange, the unexplainable, as imagination. Because I know how quickly it can stop being imagination. Still, I'm not free. The paranoia is a constant weight. Every sudden noise spikes my adrenaline. Every dark hallway feels too long. Every mirror unsettles me. I avoid them as much as possible, or keep them covered. I still can't shake the fear that one day my reflection will move a second too late, and this time I won't be able to smash the glass fast enough. People ask me why I never really settled down, why I never built a family or a home. I don't tell them the truth. That I couldn't. That I wouldn't risk letting it attach itself to someone else. That my isolation isn't just loneliness, it's protection. If I'm cursed to carry this thing, then at least I'll carry it alone. The moral of my story isn't about bravery. It isn't about fighting shadows and winning. It's about respect. Respect for the things we don't understand. Because the second you stop respecting the unknown, the second you joke about it, invite it, treat it like a game, you give it power. You open the door. And once opened, some doors don't close again. Even now, every time a bulb flickers overhead, I feel it. That prickle at the back of my neck. That memory of cold fingers brushing my skin. And I remember. Every flickering bulb, every creaking floorboard, every whisper of wind reminds me of that night. The night I laugh at the dark, and the dark laugh back. I thought sharing this story might loosen its grip on me. That speaking it aloud, finally putting it into words, would make it less real. But it's strange. Since I started, the atmosphere in this room has shifted. The lights seem dimmer, though the bulbs are new. The air feels colder against my skin. And just now, as I sit here, I hear it. A sound I know too well. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Not at my front door. Not even at the walls. From inside the apartment. The sound came from the hallway. The same hallway I filled with salt. The same boards I watched it walk across years ago. I tell myself it isn't possible. That I've moved cities, changed homes, built walls of distance between me and it. But deep down, I already know the truth. Distance doesn't matter. Locks don't matter. Time doesn't matter. Once invited, it never leaves. I can hear it again now. The faintest footsteps, slow and steady, approaching the room where I sit. I'm not going to check this time. I know what I'll see if I do. The only question left, the only thing I can't stop asking myself, is this: if it's here again tonight, why did it wait so long?